Tokyo, city of lights, city of ghosts. In the back alleys of Nakano, among forgotten relics and flickering signs, there once lay a camera. Old, cracked, and silent. They said it could capture more than light. They said it could capture the moment between life and death. No one remembers where it came from. Only that whoever pressed its shutter was never the same again. Because every photograph taken by the Minolta X-700 always had one more person in the frame than when it began. Chapter 1. The old camera in Nakano's antique market. Rain drizzled endlessly over Tokyo that December afternoon. Kenta, a third-year photography student at Tokyo University, wandered through the dim maze of Nakano Broadway, hands tucked in his coat pockets. The air smelled of damp wood, rust, and tobacco, a mixture of age and nostalgia. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, maybe an old lens for his collection. But then, something caught his eye, a Minolta X-700, sitting alone on a faded red cloth at the back of a stall. The body was scratched, the lens cracked at the edge, yet somehow, it seemed alive. When Kenta picked it up, a chill ran through his fingers, colder than the winter air. The shopkeeper, an old man with cloudy eyes, looked up slowly. "Greater than, you really want that one, boy?" Kenta smiled politely. "Greater than, yes, I collect old cameras, as long as it still works." The old man's hands trembled slightly as he pushed the camera across the counter. "Greater than, if you've decided. I won't stop you, but remember this. Don't photograph mirrors, and never use it at night." Kenta laughed awkwardly, thinking it was just a superstitious sales pitch. He paid and left, the Minolta hanging from his shoulder. But when he turned back for one last glance, the stall was already dark, the sign swinging silently. Almost as if the shop had never existed. Back in his small Shinjuku apartment, Kenta placed the camera on his desk and admired it under the lamp. He replaced the film roll, cleaned the lens, everything worked fine, except that the glass reflected light strangely, like an eye watching him back. He smirked at his own nerves and decided to test it. Standing before the mirror, he raised the camera. A sharp click broke the silence. Later that evening, he took the roll to a photo lab nearby. When the prints came out, the clerk frowned. Greater than, strange, only one photo came out properly. Kenta looked, and froze. In the mirror's reflection, behind his own smiling face, stood a woman in a black kimono, her long hair veiling half her face, her head bowed slightly. Kenta's heart pounded. He was sure he had been alone. Outside, the rain kept falling, and from the closed drawer of his desk, the Minolta gave a faint mechanical sound. Click. Chapter 2. The shadow in the frame. That night, Kenta couldn't sleep. Rain tapped against the window like ghostly fingers, whispering through the narrow room. On his desk lay the photograph, illuminated by the weak yellow glow of the lamp. The woman in the black kimono stood behind him, her posture calm yet unbearably wrong, her face hidden, her presence heavy. He told himself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection, maybe a defect in the film. But no matter how he tried to explain it, the woman's silhouette felt too real. The apartment was small, one window, one bed, one mirror. There was nowhere she could have been hiding. Kenta picked up his phone and tried snapping a few pictures of the mirror again. Nothing strange appeared. Then he turned toward the Minolta on the desk. The air grew colder. The bulb overhead flickered once, twice, then went out. In the darkness, a soft mechanical sound whispered from the desk. Click, click, click. The sound of a camera advancing its film, by itself. Kenta froze. His throat tightened. When he turned on his phone's flashlight, the camera was lying still. Its cracked lens pointed directly at him. He opened the film compartment. There was a fresh exposure. One that hadn't been there before. The next morning, he brought the new roll to be developed. When the photos came back, the shop owner, a cheerful middle-aged man, took one look and went pale. Without a word, he handed Kenta the print and walked away. In the photo, Kenta stood in his room again. But this time, the woman in the black kimono was closer. Only a few steps behind him now. Half of her face was visible, skin as white as paper. Lips cracked and dark, one eye open wide and bottomless. Kenta's hands trembled. He tried burning the photos, but the paper refused to catch fire. The prints curled and blackened at the edges, only to smooth out again, untouched. He threw them all in the trash and locked the Minolta in a metal cabinet. But when he lay in bed that night, the room silent, he heard the unmistakable tchh of film advancing from inside the locked drawer. And on the wall, faintly reflected by the moonlight slipping through the curtain, appeared the blurred outline of a woman standing behind him, her head bowed. Chapter 3. The Vanishing Photograph. The next morning, Tokyo lay under a heavy fog. Kenta woke with a pounding headache and dark circles under his eyes. He felt as if he hadn't truly slept at all. Fragments of the night haunted him, a woman's whisper close to his ear, a cold breath grazing his neck. He stumbled to the drawer and unlocked it. The Minolta was gone. Only the half-exposed roll of film remained inside, pulled halfway out as if someone had used it and forgotten to rewind. Panic rising, Kenta grabbed his laptop, hoping to find his old files, maybe some clue in the photos he'd taken. But when he opened the folder named Photographs, his blood turned cold. Every single picture was gone, deleted, except one. The first photo. The one he had taken in the mirror. Kenta double-clicked it, and froze. The image had changed. The woman in the black kimono was no longer bowing. Her head was raised, her face now fully visible. Her skin was corpse white, her eyes black as ink, and her mouth curved into a thin, crooked smile. Kenta's breath hitched. He slammed the laptop shut, but on the glossy screen, his reflection stared back, and behind him, a second pair of eyes gleamed faintly. He turned, nothing. Only the ticking clock and the faint hum of the city outside. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Greater than, am I beautiful? Before he could react, the light bulb flickered and died. His phone slipped from his hand, the screen glowing faintly on the floor. A new image appeared on it. His lock screen had changed. Now, it showed the face of the woman in the black kimono, staring straight at him. The Minolta clicked once in the dark. A cold gust swept through the room, scattering papers from the desk. And when the light from the hallway spilled under the door, Kenta saw something on the floor, a new Polaroid, still damp. He picked it up with shaking hands. It showed his apartment. The angle was from above, as if someone had been standing on the ceiling, looking down. In the middle of the photo sat Kenta, working on his laptop. And just behind him, barely visible, the shadow of a woman leaned over his shoulder. Her red lips curved in a smile. Kenta dropped the photo and fled into the hallway. But the corridor outside was silent. Every door shut tight, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of smoke, like burnt film. Behind him, his apartment light flicked back on. On the wall above the mirror, a bloody handprint now smeared down the glass. And on the desk, the Minolta lay neatly in place again, its lens pointing directly at the door, as if waiting for him to return. Chapter 4. The Missing Roommate. 3 days later, Tokyo was bone cold. A faint layer of snow began to fall over Shinjuku's narrow alleys. Kenta hadn't returned to his apartment since that night. He stayed with his friend Ryo, a fellow photography student who shared his love for old cameras, but not his superstitions. Ryo laughed as Kenta recounted everything: the ghostly woman, the cursed photos, the clicking sounds in the dark. Greater than, you've been watching too many horror films, he said. Probably a film defect or double exposure. Let me see this haunted camera of yours. Kenta hesitated. He hadn't told Ryo that the camera had reappeared in his locked drawer or about the bloody handprint on the mirror. He simply nodded, trying to sound casual. Greater than, fine, but don't use it at night. I mean it. Ryo grinned. Greater than, sure. That evening, curiosity got the better of them. They went back to Kenta's room. The apartment was quiet, the air heavy and damp. The Minolta X-700 lay neatly on the table as if it had been waiting. Ryo picked it up, examining it with interest. Greater than, beautiful old thing. He muttered, let's see if it still shoots. Kenta's chest tightened. Greater than, Rio. Don't. But Rio had already raised it. Greater than, relax. Just a few test shots. The first click echoed unnaturally loud in the small room. Rio laughed. Greater than, still works. Then he turned toward the mirror. Greater than, and now the famous mirror shot. Ready? Kenta lunged forward. Greater than, no, don't. Click. The flash burst. Then the light bulb overhead exploded with a sharp pop. The room plunged into darkness. Rio's voice trembled. Greater than, weird, the camera, it's still winding. Then silence. Kenta called his name, once. Twice. No answer. He switched on his phone's flashlight. The room was empty. Only the Minolta lay on the floor, its flash flickering weakly. Inside the film slot, a new Polaroid was developing. Kenta pulled it out, his hands shaking. The photo showed Rio, lying face down on the floor, limbs twisted, in the same posture as the woman in the black kimono from Kenta's first photograph. Kenta screamed and ran from the room. As he fled down the corridor, the Minolta clicked again behind him. The next morning, neighbors reported screams in the night. When police arrived, the apartment was locked from the inside. Rio was gone. On the desk, they found a single photograph, Kenta and Rio posing together like a selfie. But in the mirror behind them stood a third figure, the woman in the black kimono. Her pale hand resting on each of their shoulders, her lips curled in a faint smile. That night, Kenta sat alone in the dormitory. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He stared at the Minolta lying on his desk again. The lights flickered once, then went out. A woman's voice whispered close to his ear. Greater than, now, only you remain. Then came the final click. Chapter 5. Tracing the origin. After Ryo's disappearance, Kenta was no longer the same. His eyes were hollow. His hands trembled constantly, and every reflection seemed to hide something waiting just beyond sight. He knew he couldn't run anymore. He had to find out where the Minolta came from, and why it wanted him. 1. The vanished shop. He returned to Nakano Broadway, where he'd bought the camera weeks ago. The narrow corridors were darker than usual, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. When he reached the corner stall, his stomach dropped. The shop was sealed with a rusted metal shutter. Yellow police tape stretched across it. A small notice was pinned to the shutter. Greater than, do not enter, ongoing police investigation. Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. Kenta stood frozen until a man from a nearby stall called out to him. The vendor, in his 50s, lowered his voice. Greater than, you're looking for the old man, right? He's dead. Hung himself right there in that shop 2 days ago. Kenta swallowed hard. Greater than, he owned a Minolta camera, didn't he? The man frowned. Greater than, yeah, weird thing. When they found him, he was clutching that old camera like it was alive. Cops said there were photos scattered all over the floor. One of them. He hesitated, lowering his voice even more. Greater than, was a picture of his own funeral. And he was in the coffin. 2. The name in the file. Kenta bribed a junior clerk at the local police station to let him peek at the old investigation files. Inside one of the folders, a name caught his eye. Matsuda Haruko, 1978. Pinned to the file was a faded black and white photo of a woman holding a Minolta camera, the same model. The back of the photo was marked with shaky handwriting. Greater than, you can't escape the frame. It always comes before death. 3. The photographer who died twice. Digging deeper through old newspaper archives, Kenta found the truth. Matsuda Haruko had been a rising star in photography during the 1970s. Famous for her eerie funeral portraits. People said she could capture the souls of the dead in her photos. But in 1978, tragedy struck. Her only son died in a train accident. After that, her work changed. She started photographing mirrors, shadows, and empty rooms, claiming she could see her child inside the negatives. A year later, her house burned down. Police declared it an accident. Her body was never found. And her camera, the Minolta X-700, vanished from the scene. One witness, a neighbor, told reporters, "Greater than the night before the fire. I heard the sound of a camera clicking again and again, even though the power was out. When we arrived, the house was already smoke and ashes, but I swear, the flashes kept going." 4. The journal. Kenta followed a rumor that Haruko's personal journal had been preserved in the Musashino Art University archives. Sneaking in after hours, he found it, its leather cover charred, its pages smelling of smoke. The first entry read, "Greater than, this camera doesn't capture faces. It keeps souls." He turned the brittle pages. Each entry grew darker, more desperate. "Greater than, when I photograph the grave, I see him, my boy, smiling in the glass. Every night, the shutter clicks by itself. I hear him calling, 'Mama, I'm here.' But his face, it's changing. Every picture, the mouth grows wider, the eyes, darker." The last page was written in something that looked like dried blood. "Greater than, I've seen him now. He's behind me. He never left." Kenta's breath shook. As he closed the journal, the lights above flickered, and from the far end of the library came a faint click, echoing through the empty rows of shelves. He turned, and in the glass of a display case, his reflection stared back. And behind it, just for an instant, a woman in a black kimono bowed her head slowly. Chapter 6. The Photographer's Diary. The winter wind howled through the empty streets of Suginami, carrying with it the scent of rain and decay. Kenta followed an old address he'd found in Haruko's journal, a house that had supposedly burned down decades ago. The place still stood, barely. A wooden house with its roof half collapsed, the windows covered in grime, the yard swallowed by weeds. A faint smell of ash still lingered, as if the fire had never gone out completely. When he pushed open the door, it gave a long, broken creak, like something exhaling after years of silence. 1. The House of Smoke. Inside, the air was cold and heavy. Dust hung like fog, disturbed by every step. Photographs clung to the walls, blackened, warped, their subjects long gone. In a few, the faint outline of a woman could still be seen, wearing a kimono, standing in shadow. In the corner, beneath a burnt shelf, Kenta found a small wooden box. Its lock rusted through. He pried it open. Inside were two things: a roll of undeveloped film, brittle with age, a small notebook, its pages darkened and stiff. He opened the notebook. The handwriting was delicate, almost tender. "Greater than, each photograph is a door. I only need to find the one that opens." The next few pages told a story of obsession, unraveling piece by piece. "Greater than, the Minolta was not mine to begin with. It was given to me by a man in Osaka who said it could see beyond the living. When I press the shutter, I can feel my son reaching out. Greater than, last night I saw him again, clearer than ever. But why does his mouth look wrong? Why does he scream when I look too long?" And finally, in a shaky hand, "Greater than, I think he's inside the camera now. I will take one last photo. Then we'll be together." 2. The Film of the Dead. Kenta stared at the roll of film. The paper label had nearly disintegrated. On it, barely legible, someone had written, "Greater than, do not develop. For my eyes only." He should have stopped there. But curiosity, or perhaps the curse itself, drove him on. That night, back at his university's photography lab, Kenta set up the chemicals and trays. Under the dim red light, he unrolled the film, his hands trembling. As the images slowly emerged, he realized he was looking at something impossible. The first frame, a woman in a dark room, her back turned. The second, the same woman, but now a small hand rested on her shoulder. The third, she faced the camera, half of her face pale and beautiful, the other half charred and twisted, as if melted by fire. In her eyes shimmered the reflection of a crying boy. The last frame was nothing but darkness. No shape, no light, but in the center, two white dots glowed faintly, like eyes staring through the film. Dash dash dash. Free. The camera wakes. A sudden click echoed in the darkroom. Kenta froze. He had locked the door. No one else was there. But when he turned, the Minolta X-700 sat on the table, though he'd left it at home. Its lens was pointed straight at him. Slowly, mechanically, it wound its film and fired. Click. A fresh Polaroid slid out. Kenta picked it up, his breath catching in his throat. It showed him standing exactly as he was now, under the red light. And behind him stood Matsuda Haruko, eyes hollow, a faint smile curling her burned lips. Dash dash dash. He dropped the photo and bolted for the door. A bottle of developer tipped over, spilling across the photo. The paper hissed and smoked, the smell of burning chemicals filling the air. Before he escaped the room, he turned back once. The image was moving. Haruko's mouth was opening wider, stretching into a scream no human throat could make. And from the center of the photo, a pale hand was reaching out. Kenta fled into the hallway, just as the darkroom filled with the deafening sound of shutters snapping all at once. Chapter 7. The Funeral Photograph. That evening, Tokyo drowned beneath a low gray sky. Kenta stood before the gates of Yanaka Cemetery, clutching the burnt notebook of Matsuda Haruko. He had followed every clue, every whisper in her journal. Now there was only one place left to go, the grave of the woman who started it all. Dash dash dash. 1. Among the dead. Yanaka Cemetery stretched like a forgotten maze of moss and stone. The air smelled of rain, incense, and something older, something sour and cold. Crows called from the trees as Kenta walked between the gravestones, each one leaning, cracked, or swallowed by weeds. He finally found the name carved faintly into a small gray headstone. Greater than Matsuda Haruko, Matsuda Haruko, 1944 to 1978. Someone had left a photograph at the base of the grave. It was old and yellowing, showing Haruko standing in a black kimono beside her Minolta X-700. But on her shoulder rested a white, bony hand, though no one stood behind her. Kenta's breath misted, his chest tightened. He raised his phone to take a picture for his records. Just as he did, a dry voice came from behind. Greater than, you shouldn't take photos here. Kenta turned. An elderly man stood a few meters away, sweeping fallen leaves with a bamboo broom. His eyes were cloudy, his back slightly bent. Greater than, did you know her? Kenta asked. The old man nodded slowly. Greater than, she used to come here every day. After her son died, sat right there and took pictures of his grave, hundreds of them. Said she could still see him in the film. He lowered his gaze, his voice trembling. Greater than, one night, I heard a child laughing among the graves. I looked, and she was here, photographing the dark. But she wasn't alone. I swear there were two shadows beside her. Dash dash dash. 2. The photograph that shouldn't exist. Kenta knelt beside the grave, his hands shaking. He pulled out the Minolta from his bag, though every instinct screamed not to. Just one shot, he whispered to himself, for proof. He aimed the lens at Haruko's gravestone and pressed the shutter. Click. A gust of cold air swept through the cemetery, bending the trees, scattering dry leaves like ash. Kenta glanced at the photo on his camera's tiny display and froze. Behind the gravestone stood a woman and a small boy, holding hands. The woman wore a black kimono. The boy's smile was crooked, his eyes two hollow pits of shadow. Kenta's fingers went numb. The camera slipped from his grip and hit the ground. It fired again, by itself. Click. A Polaroid slid out from the slot. He picked it up. In this new photo, the graves were gone, the sky was gone. Only Kenta remained, kneeling, while a small pale hand rested on his shoulder. Dash dash dash. Free. Voices in the wind. The wind rose into a low moan that seemed to carry words. A child's voice whispered faintly. Greater than, Mama, I'm here. Then another voice, a woman's, soft, sorrowful, close behind him. Greater than, I found you at last, but someone else opened the door for me. Kenta turned wildly. The ground beneath him was darkening. the soil-bleeding black liquid that crept toward his shoes. The Minolta began to hum, vibrating on the dirt. Then it fired again. Click. He didn't look this time. He knew. The photo would show him, alive, trembling, just moments before he disappeared from the world. Kenta stumbled out of the cemetery, his lungs burning, his hands shaking uncontrollably. When he finally dared to glance back, through the fog and the crows, he saw two figures standing by Haruko's grave, one tall, one small, watching him leave. The woman lifted the camera, her burned lips curling into a faint smile. A final flash of light flickered across the gravestones. And then they were gone.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 8. The Click at Midnight. Tokyo was drowned in fog that night. Kenta walked home through the empty streets of Shinjuku. The city's neon lights blurred into streaks of color behind the mist. In his bag, the Minolta X-700 felt heavier than metal, as if something inside it was breathing. When he reached his apartment, he locked every door and window, pulled the curtains shut, and sat on the floor, staring at the camera lying on the desk. The room was so quiet he could hear the hum of the streetlights outside. He told himself, just stay calm, you're in control now. But at 12:03 a.m., as the second hand on his clock clicked forward, another sound answered. Click. The unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. 1. The first click. Kenta froze. His head turned slowly toward the desk. The camera hadn't moved, its lens still pointed toward the window. Another click. Then another. 3 shots, evenly spaced, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. He stood up, trembling. Greater than, stop it, he whispered. The Minolta gave a faint whirring noise. The film compartment vibrated as if winding itself. Kenta snatched it off the desk, ripped open the back, but there was no film inside. Yet the camera clicked again in his hand. Click. 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 He threw it across the room. It hit the wall, fell to the floor, and still clicked once more. 2. The photos that shouldn't exist. Hours later, Kenta dozed off at his desk, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. When he woke, the sky outside was black. He'd only slept for a moment. On the table beside him lay a stack of new Polaroids, damp and cold. His breath caught. He hadn't loaded film. He hadn't taken any photos. He picked up the top one. It showed him, asleep at the desk, exactly as he had been moments ago. The next photo showed him again, but from closer. The next, closer still. In the final photo, a shadow loomed behind his chair, tall and indistinct. A woman's hand, long, pale, trembling, rested on his shoulder. Kenta dropped the pictures, heart pounding. A low whisper rose behind him, like someone standing inches away. Greater than, smile. The camera clicked. 3. The mirror. Desperate, Kenta stumbled into the bathroom and switched on the light. The mirror reflected his pale, trembling face. He leaned closer, gripping the sink. Greater than, this isn't real, he muttered. It's not. But when he looked up again, the reflection was no longer his own. In the mirror stood a woman in a black kimono, her face inches from the glass, her mouth stretched into a silent scream. Click. The light flickered and died. The mirror went dark, and from its surface, fingerprints began to appear, one by one, pressing from the inside. 4. The sound that wouldn't stop. Kenta ran into the living room, gasping. He threw the camera into a trash bag, tied it shut, and shoved it into the closet. He collapsed onto the floor, shaking. For a few moments, silence. Then, click. Followed by another. And another. From inside the closet came the relentless rhythm of the shutter, slow, steady, patient, like breathing. He pressed his hands over his ears, tears streaking down his face. But even then, he could still hear it, inside his head now, echoing like a heartbeat. Click. 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 5. The final shot. At 3:12 a.m., it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Kenta crawled to the closet and opened the door. The trash bag lay still. He hesitated, then untied it. Inside, the Minolta sat perfectly clean, untouched. Its flash flickered once, then went dark. A new Polaroid slid out from the slot. Kenta lifted it slowly. In the photo, he was standing exactly where he was now, kneeling before the closet. Behind him stood Matsuda Haruko, her head tilted, one hand gripping the camera. Her voice whispered faintly through the darkness. Greater than, thank you for keeping it alive. The light in the room flared white, and the photo burned itself to ash in his hands. Chapter 9. The Police Investigation. Morning light crept weakly through the windows of Shinjuku District Police Headquarters. A soft drizzle fell over the city, washing the alleys clean of last night's shadows. At 6:47 a.m., officers arrived at apartment 405. After a neighbor reported a foul, chemical odor and strange noises, like a camera clicking, she said, over and over until dawn. When they forced the door open, the smell of burnt film and incense hit them. 1. The scene. The apartment was tidy, too tidy. No signs of struggle, no blood. But the walls, every inch, were plastered with photographs. Hundreds of them. Each photo was slightly different, the same room, the same angle, yet something in every frame had changed, shadows shifting, objects moving, lights dimming. And in many of them, a woman in a black kimono could be seen standing behind the photographer. Her face, however, was never in focus. On the desk, officers found a single camera, a Minolta X-700. Film compartment open, the last strip of film melted into the spool. There was no sign of Kenta. 2. The detectives. Detective Takeda, now gray-haired and weary from decades of strange cases, examined the scene with his young partner, Miyamoto. Greater than another disappearance? Miyamoto asked quietly. Takeda nodded. Greater than, same signs as before, the photos. The old camera model, the cursed one. He studied a Polaroid left on the floor near the desk. It showed Kenta's apartment, empty. But in the reflection of the window, two silhouettes stood side by side. One tall, one small. Greater than, there's always two. Takeda muttered, the mother and her child. 3. The forensic photos. Later that day, in the evidence lab, the technicians developed the remaining film. The results silenced the entire room. The first frames showed the apartment, as it was found. But frame by frame, a figure began to appear, closer each time. By the final image, Kenta was visible, standing in the center of the room, his eyes open wide in terror. Behind him stood the woman in the kimono, her burned lips brushing his ear, whispering something the technicians swore they could almost hear. The photo paper began to warp, smoke rising from its surface until the print turned black. 4. The missing evidence. That night, the camera and photographs were locked inside the police evidence vault. But by morning, both were gone. The guard on duty, Sergeant Sasaki, was missing too. On his desk lay a freshly developed photograph. It showed the storage room, completely empty, except for Sasaki himself, standing with his back to the camera. A pale hand rested on his shoulder. In the upper corner, someone had scrawled a line in red ink. Greater than, thank you for watching. 5. The case closed. The department filed the report under unexplained incident. The file was marked sealed. The evidence officially lost. Detective Takeda requested retirement a week later. In his resignation letter, he wrote only one line. Greater than, I saw myself inside the photo. No one ever found Kenta. But weeks later, a camera dealer in Osaka reported receiving an anonymous delivery. A Minolta X-700, slightly cracked, with a fresh roll of film inside. The first image on the roll was dated 2 days after the police raid. It showed a man kneeling on the floor, camera in hand. His face was missing, burned into white. But on the wall behind him hung a photograph of Matsuda Haruko, smiling. Chapter 10. The new owner. 3 months after the Shinjuku disappearance, the city's memory had already dulled. News channels had moved on. Police reports were sealed, and the name, Kenta Moriyama, faded into a list of unsolved cases. But in a dusty corner of Osaka's Namba district, a small antique store named Hoshino Memories quietly placed an item on its shelf, a weathered Minolta X-700. Its body cold and black, lens cracked like a spider's web. No one knew where it came from. The shopkeeper simply said, "A man left it here." Didn't say a word. 1. Ayumi Takahara. Ayumi, a 25-year-old freelance photographer, wandered into the shop one rainy afternoon. Her style was minimalist, melancholic. She captured forgotten places, decaying buildings, and lonely corners of Tokyo. The old shopkeeper noticed her interest. "Greater than that camera, it's been waiting for someone who still believes in film," she murmured. Ayumi smiled. "Greater than waiting? That's an odd way to put it." The woman's cloudy eyes didn't blink. "Greater than, be careful. This camera doesn't just capture images. It remembers them." Ayumi laughed softly, thinking it was poetic nonsense. She bought the camera, wrapped it in a scarf, and stepped into the rain. 2. The first picture. That night, in her Setagaya apartment, Ayumi placed the Minolta on her desk. The city outside buzzed with faint neon hums. But inside, everything was still. She loaded a new roll of film and pointed the camera toward the wall, a simple test shot. Click. The flash popped. The shutter's sound echoed too long, like the tail end of a whisper. When she developed the photo later, her stomach tightened. On the wall she'd photographed, someone had written in a dark, dried color, "Greater than, don't photograph mirrors." She looked up. The wall in her apartment was spotless. No writing, no marks. Her heart thudded once, then twice. She turned the photo face down. 3. The room inside the pictures. Over the next few days, Ayumi noticed something strange. Every picture she took with the Minolta showed a slightly different version of her room. Same angle, same furniture, but the lighting was colder, flatter, as though her apartment existed in two realities at once. In one photo, a cup she hadn't touched was knocked over. In another, her reflection in the window stood still, though her own body was turned away. And in one frame, almost hidden by shadows, a faint outline of a woman in a kimono could be seen at the far edge of the shot. Ayumi stared at it for a long time. She could almost feel the camera breathing in her hands. 4. The dream. That night, Ayumi dreamed of standing in a dark room surrounded by hundreds of photographs floating in the air like paper lanterns. Each photo showed a face twisted in terror, mouths open in silent screams. At the center of the room stood Matsuda Haruko, the woman from Kenta's research photos. Her hair fell over half her burned face, her eyes shining like glass. She lifted the Minolta and whispered, "Greater than, now you'll understand what it means to be seen." A blinding flash exploded. Ayumi woke gasping, her sheets damp with sweat. From the desk, in the dark, came a single sound. Click. 5. The monk. The next day, Ayumi traveled to Kyoto, following the last entry she'd found in Haruko's story, a mention of a temple where the camera had once been sealed. The elderly monk there, Rinsho, listened silently as she explained. When she placed the Minolta before him, his face drained of color. "Greater than, this shouldn't exist anymore," he whispered. "We sealed it with the mother's soul and her child's." He began chanting sutras, the air vibrating with his voice. But halfway through the ritual, the camera trembled violently, its shutter clicking faster and faster. A flash filled the temple, blinding white. When the light faded, Rinsho collapsed, blood trickling from his eyes. Ayumi fell to her knees. The camera lay still, lens cracked, and inside it, faintly, something shimmered like an eye-opening. She picked it up in shock, and in the reflection of the lens, two figures looked back at her. A mother and a child. Smiling. Chapter 11. The Spirit in the Lens. The snow began falling heavily over Kyoto that night, blanketing the temple grounds in white silence. Ayumi stood alone in the flickering candlelight beside the fallen monk. His last words still echoed in her mind. We sealed it with the mother's soul, and her child's. Her hands shook as she picked up the Minolta X-700. The lens was warm to the touch, as though it had a heartbeat. 1. The eyes behind the glass. Ayumi stumbled out of the temple into the snow. The world was hushed, her breath fogging in the cold. She wanted to throw the camera away, but when she lifted it, she saw her reflection in the lens, and behind her, two small lights, like eyes glowing softly in the dark. A whisper drifted through the wind. Greater than, you've seen us now. You can't turn away. Ayumi turned in circles, but the courtyard was empty. Only the crunch of snow beneath her feet, and the faint sound of film winding itself. She ran. 2. The hidden room. Days later, haunted and sleepless, she returned to her apartment in Tokyo. Determined to destroy the camera, she searched online for a place to have it dismantled. But each time she tried to upload a photo of it, her computer froze, the file replaced by a message. Greater than, the frame is not yet complete. Then, one night, she noticed something strange. When she took a picture of her own apartment, the film showed a door, an old sliding door that didn't exist in her home. And yet, when she looked again through the camera's viewfinder, the door was there. She approached it, heart hammering, and pulled it open. Behind it was a room that should have been impossible, filled with stacks of photographs. Hundreds of them, all hanging from strings like prayer flags. Each one captured the same woman, Matsuda Haruko, in different poses, sitting, crying, holding her son, staring directly at the lens. In every photo, her expression was the same, grief turned to obsession. And in the final image, her son was gone, only Haruko remained, smiling faintly, holding the camera. 3. The voice of the mother. Ayumi backed away, but the air thickened around her. The hanging photos began to tremble, their strings snapping one by one, fluttering like dead leaves. A woman's voice filled the room, soft but filled with sorrow. Greater than, I only wanted to keep him. The camera keeps everything, faces, souls, love. The voice turned to anger. Greater than, but no one should have taken it from me. The photos burst into flame. Ayumi screamed and raised the camera, out of instinct, out of fear, and pressed the shutter. Click. The flash froze everything in white. When her vision cleared, the room was gone. She was back in her apartment, standing alone in the dark. The walls were bare, but the smell of smoke lingered. On her desk lay a new Polaroid, still warm. It showed the monk Rinsho, kneeling in prayer beside a small boy. And behind them stood Haruko, smiling, and Ayumi herself, holding the camera. 4. The truth inside the lens. Ayumi realized what the monk had meant. The Minolta didn't just capture images. It captured moments, fragments of time, pulling the living and the dead into one eternal frame. Haruko had become part of it, a mother eternally searching for her son. And everyone who touched the camera became part of that search. Ayumi lifted the Minolta one last time and whispered, "Greater than, I'm sorry, but it ends here." She pressed the shutter against her chest. Click. The flash lit the entire apartment. Then, silence. When neighbors broke in the next morning, the room was empty. Only a single photograph lay on the floor. It showed Haruko and her son standing together in a field of white light. Between them, a third figure was slowly fading away, Ayumi, smiling peacefully as she disappeared. Chapter 12. The broadcast of the cursed image. The winter passed, and spring crept quietly across Japan. But deep inside a television editing studio in Osaka, something dark stirred again. A producer named Mika Hayes, working for Kansai TV, was preparing a new special. Greater than, Unsolved Legends of Japan, True Stories that Defy Death. One submission caught her attention, a small parcel delivered anonymously to the station. Inside was a tape, marked only with a piece of masking tape that read, Greater than, for broadcast, the camera that captured death. 1. The recovered tape. Mika's assistant loaded the tape into an old player. Static. Then, footage appeared. A young woman, Ayumi, sat in a dim room, facing the camera. Her voice was shaky but calm. Greater than, if you're watching this, it means you found the camera. Please, don't use it. It doesn't take photos. It takes people. Behind her, the Minolta rested on a table, lens gleaming faintly. Mika leaned closer to the monitor, goosebumps rising on her skin. Greater than, what is this? A film project? She whispered. But as the footage continued, something impossible happened. The image flickered, and Ayumi looked directly into the lens, as though she could see Mika through the screen. Greater than, you're next. Ayumi whispered. The tape cut to black. 2. The broadcast. Despite her unease, Mika's producers insisted on including the footage in the broadcast. Greater than, it'll go viral. They said, urban legends always do. The segment aired on March 3rd, at 10:47 p.m. Millions across Japan watched the eerie video of Ayumi's warning. At minute 47 to 32, when the camera panned across a still photograph of Matsuda Haruko, her eyes opened for a fraction of a second. The broadcast studio's phones began to ring within minutes, viewers reporting strange interference. Camera flashes going off by themselves, and a faint clicking sound that continued even after the program ended. 3. The first death. The following morning, Mika arrived at the studio early. She found the night technician slumped over his desk, eyes open but blank. The monitors around him showed nothing but static. Pinned to the wall behind him was a Polaroid photograph. It showed him alive, sitting at that same desk, but behind him, Haruko was visible, standing in the reflection of the monitor. Written in red marker at the bottom were 3 words. Greater than, thank you, Mika. 4. The viral curse. Within a week, clips of the broadcast spread across the internet. People began sharing them on YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, even TikTok, adding creepy filters and captions like, greater than, if you hear the click, she's watching you. Soon, thousands of users reported identical experiences. Phones freezing when the video reached 47 to 32. Cameras turning on by themselves. New photos appearing in their galleries, photos of themselves, taken from impossible angles. A new name began trending across Japan. Greater than the click curse. 5. The last transmission. One night, Mika stayed late to record an apology video for the public. She sat in the same editing room where she'd first watched Ayumi's tape. Her hands trembled as she spoke. Greater than, we didn't mean to release anything dangerous. We thought it was just a story. But now, the lights flickered. Behind her, the old TV turned on by itself, playing static. Through the snow of the signal, a faint image formed, Ayumi, holding the Minolta. Mika froze. Ayumi's eyes moved. She smiled faintly and whispered through the static. Greater than, smile for me. The last sound the microphone picked up was the crisp, unmistakable click of a camera shutter. When police entered the next morning, the room was empty. The only thing left on the desk was a freshly developed photograph. It showed Mika sitting in that same chair, smiling blankly, while behind her stood Haruko and Ayumi, each holding a camera. Chapter 13. The Digital Plague. Weeks after the Kansai TV incident, the station permanently removed the broadcast from its servers. But it was too late. Copies of the video, the camera that captured death, had already spread across the internet. Every repost, every share, every screen recording carried it further. By April, it had been viewed more than 20 million times worldwide. People began calling it the click curse. 1. The first symptoms. It started small. Users on Reddit, Twitter, and Nico Nico complained about hearing faint clicking sounds coming from their phones when the video paused. Then, their cameras began activating by themselves. One user, a college student from Hokkaido, live-streamed himself watching the cursed clip. Midway through, his face froze, his eyes widened, the stream cut out. When police entered his dorm hours later, he was gone. Only his webcam remained, still broadcasting. The chat replay showed the last message he typed. Greater than, she's behind me. -- 2. The code in the image. A cybersecurity researcher named Dr. Takahiro Nomura at Tohoku University began studying the file. He discovered that every version of the video, no matter who uploaded it, contained the same invisible digital pattern, a set of binary pulses hidden within the frame at timestamp 47 to 32. Greater than, it's not a virus, he told a local newspaper. It's a signal. A pattern of light frequencies that affects the brain through visual processing. Whoever sees it becomes part of its memory. 2 days after the interview, Dr. Nomura disappeared. Authorities later found his laptop still recording. The screen showed his office, empty, and on the monitor, reflected in the dark window, a woman in a black kimono watching from behind. -- 3. The dream that connects them. Across Japan, and soon the rest of the world, people began sharing the same dream. A dark room. A single camera on the floor. Hundreds of photographs hanging in midair, swaying gently like paper ghosts. And from somewhere in the dark, a woman's voice whispering, "Greater than, smile." Then the flash. Those who reported the dream said that the next day, their phones would display new photos in their gallery. Images they hadn't taken. Each one showed them sleeping. And in the corner of every picture, a faint silhouette, a woman, always closer than before. -- 4. The collapse of the network. By summer, panic gripped the media. Major platforms began removing the video, but the act of deleting it seemed to make things worse. Servers malfunctioned. Entire networks froze as their storage filled with unreadable image data, each file tagged with the same metadata. Greater than, Haruko is watching. A Tokyo broadcaster who tried to air a government safety announcement accidentally triggered the cursed frame mid-broadcast. Within hours, dozens of employees reported hallucinations, mirrors in the building reflecting a woman standing behind them, even when they turned around. That night, the entire studio went dark. The security footage ended with one frame. Every monitor in the control room flashing white at once, followed by the faint, steady rhythm of click, click, click. -- 5. The final upload. Amid the chaos, a journalist named Junpei Arata decided to trace the curse back to its origin. He tracked the chain of uploads, tracing IP addresses, forum posts, and photo metadata until they all converged on one location, the ruins of Enmyo in Temple in Kyoto. He brought a small camera and documented everything. 3 days later, his article went live automatically, scheduled before his trip. It was titled, "Greater than, I found her." Attached was a single photo, the inside of a burned-out temple, faintly lit. In the center stood the Minolta X-700, still gleaming, surrounded by ash. Behind it, in the shadows, a woman and a child faced the lens, holding hands. The caption read, "Greater than, she's no longer inside the camera. She's inside us." That night, the servers hosting the article crashed. And when they came back online, every user who had read the story found a new image saved in their device's photo folders. A picture of themselves, staring at their screens. And behind them, a pale hand reaching over their shoulder. Chapter 14, The Last Film. Autumn fell heavy over Tokyo. The leaves turned crimson, and the air smelled faintly of rain and dust, like the city itself was holding its breath. At Nihon University, a group of film students met secretly in the basement studio. Their names were Riku, Aya, Sora, and Daichi. They had one goal: to find the original film reel of Matsuda Haruko, the very first recording that had given birth to the curse. If they could understand it, maybe they could stop it. Or so they told themselves. -- 1. The reel. Riku had found it by chance at an antique fair in Osaka. The seller, a gray-haired man with trembling hands, refused payment. Greater than, "Just take it," he said. "It's not mine anymore." The canister was metal, dented and stained, with a faded label. "Greater than 1978 final roll, do not develop." Aya ran her fingers over the lid. "Greater than, if this really is her last film," she whispered. "It could prove everything." Riku looked at her, half smiling, half afraid. "Greater than, or end everything. 2. The projection. They set up the old 16mm projector in the darkroom. Daichi cleaned the lens. Sora checked the audio. The first flicker of light hit the wall. And there she was. Matsuda Haruko, filmed in grainy black and white, standing in her darkroom surrounded by photographs pinned to the walls. Her kimono was scorched at the sleeve, her face half hidden behind her hair. She looked directly into the camera. Then, she raised her Minolta X-700 and whispered, "Greater than, to capture death, you must meet it halfway." The reel crackled, the image distorted, and from the projector came the sound of another camera shutter, one that wasn't on film. Click. Free. The frame within the frame. Aya gasped. "Greater than, that sound, it came from here." On the screen, Haruko lifted the Minolta and took a photograph. But instead of showing a flash, the frame inside the film changed. It showed them, the 4 students, in the same room, watching her. The projector's hum grew louder. Riku stumbled back. "Greater than, that's impossible. This is pre-recorded." But the film kept rolling, and the images kept changing. Haruko now moved toward the camera, her burned hand reaching out through the frame as if the celluloid itself were softening. Aya screamed as the light from the projector flickered violently. 4. The fourth click. The reel jammed. Daichi tried to stop the projector, but the switch wouldn't move. The temperature in the room plummeted. Then the film began feeding backward by itself, faster and faster. The image of Haruko blurred, until her face filled the entire screen. Her mouth opened, impossibly wide, black and empty. The sound system began to crackle, and from deep within the speakers came a whisper of many voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, all saying one word. "Greater than, smile." A blinding flash filled the room. When the light faded, only Aya was left conscious. The others lay motionless, eyes wide, staring into nothing. The projector clicked once more and stopped. Click. Aya's body shook. She turned slowly toward the wall where the film had been projected. There, burned into the concrete, was an image, faint but unmistakable. The 4 of them, standing together, all smiling. 5. The discovery. 2 days later, campus security found the basement locked from the inside. The film projector was still running, its reel spinning endlessly though no film remained. No trace of Riku, Daichi, or Sora was ever found. Aya was found sitting in a corner, muttering the same words over and over. "Greater than, she's almost done developing." On the table beside her lay a single photograph. It showed a burned room filled with hanging photos. And in the center, Haruko, her son, and 4 new faces, perfectly framed, perfectly still. Chapter 15. The final photograph. Morning broke pale and silent over Tokyo. The campus of Nihon University stood still, wrapped in police tape. No sound, no students, no laughter, only the slow hum of generators powering the floodlights that illuminated the basement studio. Detective Takeda, now older, returned one last time. The memories of Shinjuku, of the cursed camera, of Kenta, all of it had come back to haunt him again. He stepped into the darkroom, the floor covered in ash and melted film. And on the table, waiting for him, sat the Minolta X-700, its lens cracked but still faintly gleaming. As though it had been expecting him. 1. The photograph that shouldn't be. Takeda looked around the room. Photographs were scattered everywhere, each one warped and burned, showing scenes that made no sense. A boy in a school uniform, smiling at his own funeral. A monk kneeling beside a woman with no face. A news anchor staring at a camera that wasn't there. And in every single one of them, Hidden in the background was the same figure, a woman in a black kimono, holding the Minolta. Takeda's breath fogged the air. He reached into his coat and pulled out the last photo from the Shinjuku case, Kenta's final picture. As he compared it to the ones before him, he froze. The camera's reflection in each photo was identical. Same crack, same angle, same glint in the lens. It was the same camera, captured over decades, through every tragedy. He whispered. Greater than, how long have you been watching us? -- 2. The last frame. He sat at the old projector the students had used. The reel still loaded. Against every instinct, he turned it on. The screen flickered. The same burned room appeared, Haruko standing in the center. Her son beside her, holding her hand. She looked up, eyes full of sorrow instead of rage, and whispered softly. Greater than, it's almost finished. Then she raised the Minolta and took one last picture. Click. The film burned, the reel melted, the smell of smoke filled the room. Takeda turned around and realized the walls were covered again, but this time with new photographs, hundreds of them. Each one showed him sitting in that chair, watching the screen. In each, Haruko was standing closer. He looked down. A Polaroid had slid from the Minolta onto his lap. It showed him exactly as he was now. But in the background, just behind his shoulder, a hand rested gently, the same pale, burned hand that had haunted every photo for decades. -- 3. The frame closes. That night, a fire broke out at Nihon University's film department. The cause was never determined. Nothing survived, not the reel, not the equipment, not even the negatives. Only one thing remained intact, the Minolta X-700, found in the ashes, undamaged. It was transferred to a museum in Shibuya under the title, The Camera That Captured Death. Visitors lined up to see it, laughing, whispering, taking pictures of the cursed relic. When they developed their photos later, each person found a faint outline in the background, a woman in a black kimono, bowing her head slightly, smiling. -- 4. The final photograph. 1 year later, the museum closed the exhibit after a sudden fire alarm. In the confusion, every photo taken that day disappeared from phones and cameras alike. Except one. A single image remained on the museum's security camera feed. A wide shot of the exhibit hall, filled with visitors. In the center of the frame, the display case stood empty. The Minolta was gone. At the edge of the image, near the exit door, a woman and a small boy could be seen walking hand in hand into the light. Both of them turned once, smiling faintly at the camera. The feed ended with a soft, familiar sound. Click. In every photograph, a moment is frozen forever. But some moments should never be kept. The Minolta X-700 has changed hands many times. From mother to son, from victim to stranger. And perhaps, one day, to you. So if you ever find an old camera sitting alone in an antique shop, and you hear a faint click behind you, don't turn around. Some memories are meant to stay undeveloped.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.